All right. Good evening, everyone. Just a mic check. Is the audio okay? Is the audio okay? Yes. Good evening, everyone. Excellent. Thank you. All right. Let us start sharp on time. It's 4 p.m. So today we're largely going to be discussing extra constitutional bodies that are important that need to be done as far as the prelims is concerned. Let me also, at the very outset, make it very clear that there are very, very few that actually need to be done, because the chances of these being asked is very, very less. But just in case, what are the ones? How are we going to go about it? Let's look at this. Let's first understand certain key insights as far as these bodies are concerned. Okay, one of the first that we need to understand is what needs to be done from what kind of bodies. Okay, so first things first, when we look at constitutional bodies for the prelims, you need to know mandate, composition, as well as function, which means what is the primary purpose, how are people appointed, how are people removed, and what are the larger detailed set of functions that they do. The thing with constitutional bodies is that you don't need to necessarily be worried about whether they're important in current affairs or not. Okay, that's the basic idea. A constitutional body can be asked in the prelims irrespective of whether it was relevant in the current affairs or not. And largely, there are five the most important ones: the Election Commission, the Comptroller and the Auditor General, the Finance Commission of India, the National Commission for Scheduled Castes, and the National Commission for Scheduled Tribes. Having said that, in 2019, we did not see a question, which means there's almost certainty, 100% guarantee that there will be a question on either of these five bodies in the prelims for sure. Okay, so this has to necessarily be done. Okay, please refresh in case you're having problems with the video. Okay, and as far as extra constitutional bodies are concerned, you need to do them in a very light capacity. And in as far as the extra constitutional bodies are concerned, you need to just know the broad mandate and broad functions of the same. That's more than enough. You don't need to really do them in a lot of detail. Okay, and that's the only thing that is needed. So you don't need to know how are people appointed, how are people removed. You don't need to know the technicalities of it. As long as you just broadly know that there is a broad mandate, this is what they want to do, and these are the broad functions, then that's all that is needed. The composition can safely be neglected as far as the prelims is concerned. Now, usually, how it works is extra constitutional bodies are usually asked in the context of current affairs, that there have been certain developments around them. So one needs to know which is why it is important and things like that. So that's the broad insights. With constitutional bodies, you do them in detail. With extra constitutional bodies, you don't do them in a lot of detail. Okay, clear? And broadly speaking, when we look at bodies, okay, these bodies are largely of three kinds. The ones which are directly mentioned in the constitution called constitutional bodies, the ones which are originated because of a law called statutory bodies, and the bodies which have been authorized by a government by the executive. These are called executive bodies. So Election Commission of India is a constitutional body, the Lokpal is a statutory body, and the Niti Aayog is an executive body. That's the basic difference. The basic question, the more important question is, why are constitutional bodies actually called constitutional bodies? What is something that they do that most other people don't? So constitutional bodies, in one way or another, actually perform a function of check and balances. They being essentially from the permanent executive, keep a check on the functions of the elected executive and sometimes the legislature. Now, ordinarily, the bureaucracy does not have the powers to do that because the bureaucracy is appointed and the elected executive is elected. So the bureaucracy has to be given certain special powers, have to be given certain special protections. These protections would mean independence of tenure, would mean fixing the salaries. These protections would mean a stricter majority to get them removed. And that's the larger idea. So it's basically the permanent executive plus certain special powers so that they can independently keep a check on the elected executive as well as the legislature, essentially makes them a constitutional body. So that is why amongst all of these, the constitutional bodies have been given the greatest amount of powers, the greatest amount of security, and the greatest amount of privileges. That's the reason. And one of the reason is when we look at statutory bodies, they're essentially working because of a law that has been passed. So statutory body cannot be given that many powers because it would take the very essence of the democratic mandate away. It would essentially make the government inferior to a statutory body, which is also the larger case. But constitution bodies, because constitution is the supreme law, are given the highest amount of status. That is why a body is called a constitutional body, whereas another body is called a statutory body. So I'll just say this again once. A constitutional body is one which in one form or another performs a function of check and balances against the elected executive or the legislature. The judiciary cannot do that all the time because of separation of powers. And the constitutional bodies are largely chosen from the permanent executive, and the permanent executive does not have the inherent powers to keep a check on the elected executive because the permanent executive is appointed and the elected executive is elected. So, if you want somebody under you to keep a check on you, you have to make sure that the person under you should not be given any less amount of powers. It's like, for example, if you're working in an office and the boss of your office has asked the juniors of the office to, look at whether the boss is doing a good job or not. Unless you assure the juniors that whatever you say will not lead to you getting fired, no junior will actually say things more honestly, right? The same logic applies. The elected executive does exactly the same, right? So the Election Commission of India, which essentially looks at elections to the legislatures, they regulate elections, they essentially look at model code of conduct. That's how they essentially look at the legislative function. Okay, Abhishek? All right, clear. So that's the idea. Now, there are certain derivations that you must understand. Okay, this is slightly important. I just need you to understand this in a slight amount of detail. This is slightly important. Okay, let's see how this works. What this basically means is there are constitutional bodies, there are statutory bodies, and there are executive bodies. Constitutional bodies, statutory bodies, and executive bodies. Out of all of these, there are some of them which are also called regulatory bodies. A regulatory body is a type of these bodies. This is a classification and this is a type. Let's understand certain derivations right at the very beginning of today's session. Usually, executive bodies do not have blanket powers. They do not have the powers to punish, they don't have the powers to conduct detailed inquiries. There's a reason behind this. The reason is a very simple one: rule of law. If somebody has any power to implement the law, to interpret the law, to officiate on the law should give that institution the power to use the law. Now, executive bodies have been created by an order of the legislature, not by passing a law, or not by being mentioned in the constitution. So, amongst all of these three, the least powerful are executive bodies. It's because at a fundamental level, India is a rule of law nation. Okay. Now, a regulatory body is one that issues the rules of the game in a sector. For example, you would have heard of something called SEBI, the Securities Exchange Board of India. Now, the Securities Exchange Board of India is a regulatory body. It governs anything and everything with respect to the share markets or the capital market sector, which means if a company which decides to have their shares listed in the stock market, they can't do that without SEBI's approval. And the SEBI can lay down guidelines, can lay down procedures on the basis of which, that's the larger idea, on the basis of which shares can be traded, can be bought, can be sold. They can be sold cheaper than an X amount of price. Inside the trading is a problem, things like that. So the reason that happens is because a regulatory body is essentially what is doing, a regulatory body is essentially regulating an entire sector. And that's the larger idea. Now understand the derivation. This is a very important line. All regulatory bodies are constitutional or statutory bodies, which what basically it means is a regulatory body can be a constitutional body, can be a statutory body, but can never be an executive body. Because if you're regulating, you're giving, let us say, rules that you can't sell your shares beyond a point. Your companies have to be listed in a certain way. So, if a regulatory body has the power to frame rules and regulations, this power should always originate from rule of law. And because executive bodies do not have a legal backing behind them, do not have a law which gives them the powers to exist, so executive bodies do not have do not have the powers under any circumstances to frame regulations in a given context. The reason executive bodies can't frame regulations is because they're not backed by a law. And if you're not backed by a law, you are violating the principle of rule of law. And if you're violating a principle of rule of law, then you cannot be given the powers to regulate a sector. So, for example, uh, even the Election Commission of India, if you look at it, the Election Commission of India is actually a regulatory body. It regulates the conduct of elections to the president, the vice president, the central houses of legislature, and the state houses of legislature. They look at something called Model Code of Conduct. The Election Commission drafts the Model Code of Conduct. It gives you guidelines that A is allowed, B is not allowed, C is allowed, D is not allowed. If you have a problem with the conduct of elections, with the management of elections, you have to actually file a complaint with the Election Commission of India, right? So that is why. So Election Commission of India is a constitutional body. It's a constitutional body which is also a regulatory body. Okay. Now let's take the case of, for example, RBI. Now, the RBI is a regulatory body. There is the RBI Act, which allows the RBI to exist. Okay. And that's the very, very interesting part of this. So, if there's a bank which has to exist in this country, the bank must take the permission to exist from the RBI. So the idea is if you have a regulatory body and if you have a statutory status, you can perform an executive function. See, the idea is a statutory body can perform an executive function, but an executive body cannot perform a statutory function. That's the basic idea. Of course, the RBI is a statutory body. Now, you must understand. I'll take a minute here. Let me finish what I'm discussing. Okay, and that's very important because whenever you post a comment here, I will always have a look at it to look for if there's anybody having an audio issue, because then I'll report it to the tech team. So wait for me to finish. I will give you time to ask doubts. Please post your doubts in the questions upstairs and then I will answer them. Okay. So let me just answer this question. Okay. All right. Thank you. So the Reserve Bank of India is a statutory body under the RBI Act. So therefore, it can also be a regulatory body because a law called the RBI Act allows for the Reserve Bank of India to exist. Clear? And therefore, the Reserve Bank of India regulates the banking sector. It becomes a banker to the banks. It also determines your bank rates, CRR rates, SLR rates, repo rates, reverse repo rates, and stuff like that. It's because the RBI is essentially is a statutory body which also happens to be a Regulatory body. So regulatory body is a classification, is a type, and whether you're a constitutional body or a statutory body or an executive body is a classification, and that's the larger idea. Clear? So that's the interesting part. All regulatory bodies are either constitutional bodies or statutory bodies. Okay. Now, this is something even more interesting. In the parliament, you will often study this. You study there are three kinds of bills. Okay, there are three kinds of bills. The first is a money of the first is an ordinary bill. The second is a money bill, and the third is a financial bill. Now, a financial bill can be of one and two types. You don't have to know the difference. Nobody in the exam is going to ask you a difference between a money bill and a financial bill. Okay, so let's understand this very simply put. If you're doing something new, a new idea, a new body, a new law, anything new, that becomes an ordinary bill. If you're doing something that requires money, and this is mentioned under Article 110, so money out of the Consolidated Fund of India, money into the Consolidated Fund of India, money out of the Contingency Fund of India, money into the Contingency Fund of India, or if the Parliament is borrowing on behalf of the government, any of those reasons. And you don't have to worry about those reasons in technical. Basically, a money bill is anything which requires either the spending of money or would lead to the government making more money. That's it. But you're not doing something new. Anything which just and just requires money is a money bill. Clear on this? And that's the larger idea. And a financial bill is anything which is new and requires money. So I'll give you an example. For example, triple talaq. Triple talaq is an ordinary bill passed through simple majority. You did not need money to pass the triple talaq law to criminalize any act of triple talaq. Okay, let's take another example. Let us say I want to increase the salary of Supreme Court judges. Now, we should know that the Parliament has the powers to do that, so it does not require a constitutional amendment. You are not adding more number of judges, you're simply giving them more amount of money, and the money will have to come from the Consolidated Fund of India. So increasing the salary of Supreme Court judges becomes a money bill, right? Now, what if I am adding more number of judges in the Supreme Court? Is this something new? Yes, because I'm adding new judges, more posts. Will this require money for the new judges? Yes. So it is something new and requires money. It becomes a financial bill. Okay. The same logic now applies to regulatory bodies. So all those regulatory bodies, which are statutory bodies, hmm, let us say Securities Exchange Board of India, Insurance Regulated Development Authority, Competition Commission of India, Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, any of these are all regulatory bodies. Okay? Yes, these are all regulatory bodies. Now, when they were all formed through a law, through an act. Were they all something new? Yes. Did they all require money? Yes, because you're going to have a new set of people who are going to be holding positions of authority. So, new and money. So, each of these always become financial bills. All statutory bodies are financial bills. So, all regulatory bodies that are also statutory bodies are also financial bills. All statutory bodies, when are passed as financial bills, and all regulatory bodies, which are statutory bodies, are also financial bills. And that's the larger idea. Okay. Now, as we discussed in terms of hierarchy, the top of the top is a constitutional body. Then you have an executive body. Then you have, sorry, a statutory body. And then you have something called an executive body. A constitutional body, in one way, is performing the function of checks and balances. right? So of course, you have to make sure, that you are giving them the right kind of majority to, have them removed. So that is why you will notice most constitutional bodies, most of them are removed through special majority in the same manner as that of the Supreme Court judge, because a constitutional body in a larger domain is actually performing similar functions as that of the Supreme Court without being the Supreme Court, because they're also performing checks and balances. They're also performing a check on the permanent executive, a check on the legislature. So that is why. Okay. So you have to give them a kind of independence of tenure. You have to keep it strict. You can't have the government interfere. Okay. Now, having said that, look at statutory bodies. Hmm? Now, statutory bodies have been created by law, a law which has been passed by a financial bill of the parliament. Now, the government should usually have a sense of control here, which is why you will notice most of the members of the statutory bodies, most of the members are actually removed by the president on the advice of the council of ministers. The only difference is you have mentioned some specific grounds, like if a person is employed somewhere else, if the person is committing a crime under a corruption law, things like these. So you have mentioned the grounds, but the person removing it is the president on the advice of the council of ministers. Clear on this? Whereas an executive body can be removed at any given point of time as and when you would feel the case. So I'll make you understand this. A constitutional body performs the functions of checks and balances, which basically means if this is the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, the constitutional body is basically the permanent executive plus special powers, and they are keeping a check on the elected executive by, or for example, the CAJ auditing the reports of the ministry. Now, this has to be placed before the parliament. When the CAG audits the reports of the elected executive, which is the ministry, it is basically performing a check and balance function, asking them that, boss, you said you're spending 10,000 crores on building roads. What 10,000 crores spent? Were the roads worth 10,000 crores? This is basically a review function, which is something the Supreme Court also does in a PIL. So both of them perform very similar functions. Now, the Supreme Court can't get into the nitty gritties of it because of separation of powers. But the permanent executive, which has been given special powers and made constitutional bodies, can, because now they are able to do what the Supreme Court can't do. And the Supreme Court एकदम गली में नहीं घुस सकता था. Constitutional bodies गली में घुस सकता है और गली में घुस के चेक कर सकता है कि बॉस ये सही है कि नहीं है. That's the basic idea. That's the larger idea behind this. ठीक है? It's essentially what it is. Okay, the Supreme Court is like a surgical strike, and constitutional bodies is like a police encounter going into the gullies. They're essentially the same thing, and that's the larger idea. That's exactly what is happening. Okay, good, excellent. So that's how it works. These are some derivations you must know, so that if you get questions, you can easily remember these. These are very logical and very logical to do, and you will never ever go wrong with these. Okay, all right, excellent. So how have we decided that these are the bodies that are important? Simple as that. First, I've gone through something called the monthly policy review of the PRS. PRS is a legislative. It's an NGO which basically analyzes the legislative, the policy developments of the government. Okay. The second is I've gone through all the press releases of the law ministry. The third is I've gone through all major institution related press releases given by the Press Information Bureau, and I've gone through almost all current affairs compilations from Vajiram Vision Insights Forum, whatever, and gone through it and seen if there are any important ones. And to be very honest, there are just two extra constitutional bodies that are really important. We'll do a couple of others just in case to be on the safer side, but there are actually just two. The first is Lokpal. Okay. Now, why is this important? It's because last year India has appointed One of the first members of its Lokpal, retired former Supreme Court Judge Pinaki Chandra. And that's the reason why Lokpal becomes important. Okay, so let us see how this works. So first things first, will and this is largely for the pre. So we're not going to get into the details. Okay, this is not needed for the mains. This is just for the details. Okay, let us see how this works. All right. Now let's start first. So Lokpal is a statutory body, which means there is a law that creates Lokpal. The law is called the Lokpal Act of 2013. The act was passed in 2013, and the first Lokpal was appointed in 2019, which means for about 6 years, the government, after passing a law, did not implement it. Hmm? So, in one line, what is Lokpal? Lokpal is a national level body which looks at cases of corruption, so it's anti corruption, and it is an ombudsman. This is a very important word, ombudsman. Okay, now this originally existed in the Scandinavian countries, Finland, Sweden, and even to other parts of the world, such as New Zealand. That's where ombudsman as an idea comes from. And ombudsman literally, obviously, means a watchdog. Excellent, Aditya. But it means anybody and everybody can go to the ombudsman and tell them that, listen, we have a problem, this person is being corrupt, please look into the actions of this person. So an ombudsman is basically the idea of an institution where you can go complain to. So any institution that you can go complain to is an ombudsman. Okay, that's the basic idea, ombudsman. Uh, Very popular in the Scandinavian belt, so Sweden, Norway, Finland, for that matter. Of course, other parts also of the world, such as New Zealand. The word ombudsman actually comes from there. So, for example, let us say you have a banking ombudsman, and let us say you are buying a loan from State Bank of India, and one of the loan agents wrongly informs you of the loan guidelines and charges you 20,000 rupees as processing of the loan. Now, you shouldn't have been charged that. So you can go complain to the banking ombudsman, who will then take necessary action to, answer your queries and answer your fraud. So that's the basic idea. Okay. So that's it. Yes, in a way, you can call RBI as the banking ombudsman. No doubt. You can absolutely call RBI as a banking ombudsman. In one way, yes. Absolutely. Yes, Aditi, of course. Right. Now, let's look at what this is. It's a national anti-corruption ombudsman. It's basically like a class representative. कि तुम फॉर एग्जाम्पल कॉलेज में क्लास रिप्रेजेंटेटिव होता है और तुमको लग रहा है कि कल्चरल कमिटी ने तुमसे 100 रुपए ले लिए हैं और वो 100 रुपए से खाना खाएंगे, करेक्ट? तो तुमने क्लास रिप्रेजेंटेटिव को बोला, ये देखो कल्चरल कमिटी करप्ट है, वो 100 रुपए का खाना खा रहे हैं और हमको कल्चरल परफॉर्मेंस नहीं दे रहे हैं. That cultural committee becomes an ombudsman. That's the basic idea. There's nothing really more on this, and that's how it actually works. Okay, great, excellent. Now, so let's look at some key points, and let's look at some key points as to how we need to know them for the P. Please pay attention. Okay, so first things first, anyone can file a complaint non-anonymously. This can't be like your confession pages. This has to be, you have to say who you are. That's the basic idea. This cannot under any circumstances be anonymous. You have to declare your identity. So anyone who's filing a complaint has to file the complaint non-anonymously. Okay, you have to disclose your identity. Second, uh, the complaint can be against anyone except senior judiciary. This is because of separation of powers and checks and balances. The Supreme Court judge can only be removed if through a process of the Parliament, where you require a special majority, that is two-thirds of present and voting in such a way that two-thirds in more than half of the total strength of the House. And that is why. The rationale behind, very good question actually, Shashank. Um, why are you doing this? Why does it have to be non-anonymous? Now, there are two sides to the story. So, first side of the story is when you have a non-anonymous complaint, you can make sure that frivolous complaints are out. That just because somebody has a problem with anyone, so you can just randomly make up a problem and a personal grudge, so that that personal grudge does not exist. The other side to the argument is that if the complaints are non-anonymous, it can compromise the security of the individual, and action can be taken with respect to the same. So that is why. Okay, right. Now it includes anyone, including the prime ministers, MPs, group A, B, C, D officers of the central government. Please understand the key word here actually is central government. कोई भी central government में काम कर रहा हो तो करना चाहिए. And that could be the prime minister, the other ministers, the MPs, the secretaries to MPs, group A, B, C, D, कोई भी in any service of the central government, it is basically under Lokpal. So Lokpal क्या है? Lokpal is basically, this is how it actually works. So Lokpal basically is a body. This body will have 8 people. Okay, and these 8 people will be the ones who will be giving the larger kind of policy, the larger kind of directions to the body. And this body will have certain departments, like for example, NMC has some core members, and NMC has certain departments. NMC stands for National Medical Commission, like undergraduate board for UG medical education, postgraduate board for PG medical education, medical assessment board like the UGC for medical education, things like that. In the same way, these are the core members of Lokpal. We appointed one of them last year, and you have some bodies under Lokpal. These bodies are going to implement the broad directions given by these members. This is the structure of Lokpal. So out of these 8 people, there are going to be a minimum of 4 who have to be judicial members. अब ये जज भी हो सकते हैं, सुप्रीम कोर्ट के भी हो सकते हैं, रिटायर्ड हाई कोर्ट के भी हो सकते हैं, कुछ भी, anybody who's a judicial member. A judicial member essentially basically means a judge 99% of the time. Okay, India does not have a jury, so jury does not exist, so that doesn't count. Okay, and then you have sorry, maximum, a maximum of 4 members should be judicial bodies. Sorry, maximum, a maximum out of these 4 people should be judicial bodies. Okay, now I'll explain why have a Lokpal when you already have a CVC in this time. Don't worry. Now, out of these 8 people, a maximum of 4 should be judicial members. And out of these 8 people, at least half should be SC, ST, OBC, or women. SC, ST, OBC, or women. Now, how does this work? SC, ST, OBC slash women, matlab. For example, let us say out of these 8, we've chosen 4 judicial members. इसमें से एक judicial member SC, ST, OBC और women में से भी हो सकता है. This overlaps with each other. This is a lot like Panchayati Raj. Okay, like for example, we say 1/3 of all the sarpanches should be women, and we should also have SC, ST reservation according to state population in our villages, which basically means that if there is a village and we've declared that village to be a village that will have a female SC, and we also have declared that village to be an SC village, then that village will have an SC woman sarpanch. The same logic actually applies here, where you look at a maximum of 4, and out of these 8 people, at least half includes SC, ST, OBC, and women. Includes everybody. Yes, includes everybody. Okay. Now, let's talk about the boards. Hmm? What can the boards do, and what is the idea behind this? Overlap basically means out of 8 people, if there are 4 which are judicial members, and you anyways have to keep at least 4 which are SC, STs, and OBCs and women. This does not apply to the remainder 4. It can apply to anybody. So out of these 4 people, you can say at least 2 of them, 2 of our judicial members are SC, ST, OBC slash women. That is also completely okay. Nobody is going to say anything on that count. Okay. Now, The Lokpal will have basically two departments. Hmm? Two departments. Department number one we call an inquiry wing. अभी देखो कैसे होता है, बहुत ध्यान से समझना. अभी 2 मिनट लिखना बंद करो. Just stop writing and understand how this works. Okay, let's see. For example, let us say, for example, there is a theft in your house. When there is a theft in your house, you then go to the police station and you tell one of the investigation officers to write a complaint. The investigation officer writes a complaint and gives you a copy of the complaint. Then the investigation officer starts investigating and then is able to identify this is a legitimate theft, a genuine theft, there's a gang operating. And then, after finding the people who have committed a theft in your house, they decide to file an FIR, which means this action actually has two stages: complaint and FIR. In the same way, the inquiry wing has two stages: a preliminary inquiry and investigation. First, you have to figure out whether this is a genuine issue or not. In law, we use a term called prima facie. Prima facie means from the looks of it, दूर से लग रहा है कि बॉस कुछ तो दाल में काला है, कुछ तो प्रॉब्लम है. Yes, that is what is called prima facie. Clear? So we'll first see whether there is a broad problem or not. This has to be done within 3 months, and it can be extended for another 3 months. You do not need to know the timeline for the pre. This is just to explain this to you. Once you have figured this out, कि yes, कुछ तो गड़बड़ है, कुछ तो खूनी ने किया है, कुछ तो गड़बड़ है, there is a problem, right? Then you enter a detailed investigation, and that detailed investigation must happen within 6 months, which can also be extended for another 6 months. But you don't need to know the timelines for the pre. मतलब basically 3 महीने में ये बताओ कि कोई genuine problem है कि नहीं, और 6 महीने में पूरा investigation खत्म करो. Then you have something called the prosecution wing. Prosecution wing is a lot like Harvey Dent from Batman. मतलब they will sit and see, अच्छा अब केस बन गया है, अब इस केस को प्रोसीड कैसे करें, what should our legal strategy be? Because at the end of the day, even if the executive has figured out there is a problem, right, whether the final decision is to be given or not has to be given by the judiciary. Clear on this? That's the basic idea. मतलब ये तो बहुत सिंपल हो गया ना. लेजिस्लेचर, एग्जीक्यूटिव, जुडिशरी. लोकपाल का कानून किसने बनाया? लेजिस्लेचर ने. प्रिलिमिनरी इंक्वायरी किसने करी? एग्जीक्यूटिव ने. अब डिसाइड कौन करेगा कि हाँ भाई गलत किया है कि नहीं किया है? जुडिशरी. Separation of powers. Legislature made the Lokpal law. The executive, which is a part of the preliminary inquiry, some officers who are posted there, they will conduct the investigation. Then the judiciary will decide. For that, we will have a special court that we will set up, and who will then decide whether or not there is a genuine case or not. Clear on this? तो लोकपाल उस तरह से वो बेसिकली रेडी करता है, वो इन्वेस्टिगेशन करता है, लॉयर्स लाता है, टीम रेडी करता है. Basically, the commissioner if of in Batman plus Harvey Dent of Batman is equal to Lokpal. Okay, commissioner plus Harvey Dent of Batman becomes Lokpal. कि हम इंक्वायरी भी करेंगे और हम प्रोसिक्यूशन भी रेडी करेंगे, स्ट्रॉन्ग करेंगे, और हम जाके केस लड़ेंगे. That's the basic idea. Okay, all right. Prosecution is basically लीगल स्ट्रैटेजी कि हम ये वकील कोर्ट में जाएगा, लड़ेगा. जैसे सीबीआई के भी लॉयर होते हैं, वैसे ही लोकपाल के भी लॉयर होते हैं. क्लियर? ऑल राइट. लोकपाल का जजमेंट नहीं होता ना, तो लोग एक कोर्ट में जाएगा. देयर इज नो जजमेंट. द लोकपाल इज नॉट अ कोर्ट. अब ये थोड़ा ध्यान से सुना है, थोड़ा सा टेक्निकल है. नाउ लोकपाल, सीवीसी एंड सीबीआई. बहुत ध्यान से सुनना. Now, technically, Lokpal and CVC were on the same levels of hierarchy. Okay, they're on the same levels of hierarchy. But after Lokpal has been fully institutionalized, Lokpal has now become your umbrella body for anti-corruption, which means Lokpal can now issue directions to the Central Vigilance Commission, and the Lokpal can also issue directions to the CBI. पहले क्या होता था that the CBI was actually under the CBI, and it still is. The CBI is actually under the CBI, but now everything is under Lokpal. The Lokpal can give directions to the CBI, can allot cases to the CBI. The CBI can also refer cases to the Lokpal. You don't need to know the technical details of it, but basically the idea is there is a Lokpal. The Lokpal can give directions to the CBC, and the CBI is under the CBC. So the Lokpal can give directions to CBI and CBC. If A is equal to B and B is equal to C, then A is equal to C. That's the basic idea. Yes, you have to do the same. So the basic question becomes, what is the broad difference between a Lokpal and a CVC? मतलब क्या चल क्या रहा है? What are you essentially trying to do? What is the larger issue? Where is the problem? Okay. The Lokpal covers a larger chunk of officers. Larger chunk. मतलब group A, B, C, D, prime ministers, MP, everybody. CVC largely looked at all India services and senior government officials. All India services and senior government officers. तो basic फर्क क्या था? लोकपाल looked at A plus B plus C plus D group A से group D तक, whereas CVC did not look at group B and group C officers. That was the basic difference. Now that difference does not exist much because the Lokpal can give directions to the CVC on anything and everything. अगर लोकपाल ने कहा कि नहीं एक ग्रुप बी ऑफिसर के अगेंस्ट पे आपको देखना है तो आपको देखना पड़ेगा. Clear? If you have to look at an inquiry or investigation against a group B officer, you will have to. So largely these are your three major bodies. What is CBI at the center? CBI basically looks at cases of central government corruption, or if the a case of the states have been referred to the CBI. जैसे आरुषि तलवार murder case, the Kothari case, these were referred to the CBI. CBI did not have automatic jurisdiction. CBI is largely a central government corruption investigation agency. What is CBI at the center is actually called ACB at the states, Anti-Corruption Bureau. Okay, yeah, the Lokpal refers it. Now, the technical part. थोड़ा ध्यान से सुनना. This is about the Prime Minister and the Lokpal. Is the Prime Minister under Lokpal? Yes, he technically is under Lokpal. Now, if the Prime Minister is under Lokpal, there are certain conditions. If there is a complaint regarding international relations, external or internal security, internal or external security, and atomic energy, as well as space. These are also largely departments which come under the PMO as well to a large extent. So that is why. So if there is about international relations, external or internal security, atomic energy and space, because these are departments, Department of Space under the PMO, then there is no complaint whatsoever. The complaint will be rejected. Second, after those 8 members of Lokpal, they all of them 8 have to agree that yes, there is at a broad area they have to agree yes, there is something prima facie wrong. Let's look at it, and at least 2/3 they have to say yes, the investigation was also right. So yet technical detail is not needed, but you have to all the members of the Lokpal have to agree that yes, we have to investigate the Prime Minister. After investigation, now this is the fun part. After investigation, if it is found out that the Prime Minister is not guilty, the Prime Minister is not guilty, then the records have to be sealed. Nobody has to be informed about the outcome of it. I'll explain this to you. Please listen to this very carefully. This basically means there can be a complaint against the Prime Minister at the Lokpal as long as the complaint is not about international relations, external security, internal security, atomic energy, and space. Apart from all of these, you can file a complaint. तो बचा क्या मुझे नहीं पता, but ठीक है, if they are saying so. Then the entire Lokpal, all the 8 members must agree that there should be a there must be a complaint. Okay, and there must be an inquiry. After an inquiry, you have figured out that okay, let's see, the prime minister is innocent, and yes, the prime minister is absolutely innocent, and we have figured out that the prime minister is innocent. Then the report of that inquiry does not have to be disclosed. ठीक है, that's the basic idea. It's like going to the police and saying, मेरे दोस्त का खून हो गया है, my friend has been murdered. The police says, yes, yes, your friend has been murdered, and no doubt your friend has been murdered. The body was not under suspicious, मतलब yes, the body was found under suspicious circumstances. Now the police says, but I can't tell you whether the person actually committed the murder or not. So that is the basic problem. That is why this is slightly vague. This is slightly problematic because we don't know what the larger domain is. Okay. Now, yes, this committee can decide to seal it. There are no this thing. The committee can decide that basically you don't want to tell the people of this country why do you think the prime minister is safe. That's the basic idea. You don't have to tell the people of the country. बस हमने बोला कि वो सही है. वो क्यों सही है ये मैं नहीं बताऊंगा. Because बोले तो बोले क्या, करे तो करे क्या. That. Okay. Right. There are some key points that we must also know here. Key point number one. Uh, uh, the Lokpal cannot have a dream and file a complaint. No suo moto. Supreme Court can go suo moto, but Lokpal cannot go suo moto. There has to be a complaint. Only if there is a complaint can you act on it. Okay. And second, there is obviously a lack of transparency with respect to the prime minister. And that's all that is largely needed. Now, please hold on a second. I have to go through things. Is the governor also under Lokpal? The governor is removed by the center. The governor is not an office. So, मैंने नहीं लिखा है, governor is not. If the records are so, okay, let me see this. Uh, okay. Uh, if the records are so sealed, then can the same things be challenged in a court? Actually, a very, very good question. There is something called malified intention. So, can the Supreme Court or any other court look into this? Maybe yes. But then there is a law that has given this power for the records to be sealed, and it is the discretion of the Lokpal. So what you can actually do, a very, very good question. What you can actually do is you can challenge the provision which says that the records should be sealed. And that's the idea behind it. Okay. So can you challenge the provision here? Because the provision itself sounds arbitrary. So that's the basic idea. But can you also largely challenge this on malified intention? Well, technically you can. Because ये कहीं नहीं लिखा है that this is not judicially reviewable. So you will not win the case, but yes, you can. Okay. Wait one second, one second, one second. Please wait, please wait. Dharmendra. So does this not create multiple overlying jurisdiction between Lokpal and CVC? Yes, it does. It creates a lot of confusion actually. That's the larger problem. So the Lokpal then becomes the broad body. The CVC and the CBI now work under Lokpal. ये अपना अपना भी करेंगे चुपचाप. They will do their own thing. And whenever Lokpal uncle calls and says, look into this, they will also look into this. So that is the basic idea. Okay. So the CBC and CBI will continue to do what they had to do. But if the Lokpal tells them to do something, you will also have to do what you've been asked to do. Like, for example, you're the collector of a district, you have decided to have water management projects in your district. Please go ahead, no problem at all. Okay, no problem at all. But then your MP calls and says, the boss, your chief minister calls you up and says, what is this water management? I want you to put solar panel. Then you also have to put solar panel also. Okay. Yes, right. The Lokayuks are basically the versions of Lokpal at the state. There's no major change there, and the states can have their own versions. In some states, chief ministers are under it. Some states, chief ministers are not under it. It's entirely up to you. You don't have to worry about it. Okay. 1 second. I'm going through the questions that are posted upstairs. That's the whole point. Can the Lokpal appoint? You should have a maximum. You can have less than 4 people also, Prabhat. Yes. Supreme Court decisions challenged in some other. Special court decisions, yes, there will be an appellate mechanism. Yes. Can special courts be Lok Adalats? No. The special courts will be special Lokpal courts. Lok Adalats are courts which are set up at the grassroots level to look at minor property and civil disputes. Is it really necessary? We wanted a consolidation exercise, but we haven't done it the right way. Okay. The judiciary is under RTI. The Chief Justice of India is under the RTI. Chalo, ठीक है. Now we next move to Central Information Commission and RTI. ये थोड़ा सा technical है. Please देखो क्या होता है. ठीक है. Is Lokpal a financial bill when it was passed? Yes, Lokpal was a financial bill, something new, and it required money because the members have to be paid a salary. Okay. So that's the larger idea. Now let us look at a few things and let's see how this has to be done. And uh, so we're now looking at the right to information, which is a fundamental right. One sec. Okay. Now let's carry on. Okay. This is very, very important because of an amendment which was passed in 2019. So this is why the right to information, the chief information commissioner, and things like these become important. Pre के लिए क्या important है बहुत ध्यान से सुन लेना इसके ऊपर. There's whatever is important for the pre I'm going to discuss right now. Anything above and beyond is absolutely not needed. So please listen to this carefully. Okay. First things first. If they ever ask you a question, the answer is a very simple one. The right to information is a fundamental right under Article 19. Article 19 says there is freedom of speech and expression. For me to speak and express freely, I should have the information so that I can express freely. So if I don't have access to information, I cannot speak freely. So that is why in multiple Supreme Court judgments, Raj Narayan in UP, SP Gupta, multiple judgments, you will not be asked those judgments, but you are essentially what is a fundamental right. Okay, the right to have an informed opinion. Absolutely. Okay, now please understand this. We create something called the RTI Act. ये बहुत ध्यान से सुनना. So what happens is information is in the concurrent list. बहुत ध्यान से. If something is in the concurrent list, both the center and the states can make laws on it. If there is no law at the center, the states can continue to make their laws. That is why, for a very, very long time, the states had their own RTI laws. The same actually happened with Lokpal. For a very, very long time, states have had their own Lok Ayugs, their own Lok Ayugs, and it is later on when we actually came up with something called the Lokpal. So the states have also had their own RTIs, their own Freedom Information Acts. They've had their own information bodies and stuff. And one of the first states to actually do this was Rajasthan, and there was an organization called the Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangh. Okay, they were the ones responsible for the same. One of the key proponents of the RTI. Okay, and that's essentially how it went. Right. So, and from an international perspective also, one of the first times the RTI was ever discovered in the world was actually in the year 1766 in Sweden, when democracy also did not exist fully and flourishly. The king of Sweden actually wanted the people of Sweden to know what the king was up to. And then in 1966, you also had the US, which eventually passed their first ever RTI law. And then the world followed suit, and India finally had this. So let's look at what is important as far as the RTI is concerned. So, under the RTI Act of 2005, public authorities are required to make disclosures on certain aspects of their structure and functioning. किस तरह का disclosure? Disclosure on their organization, functions, and structure, the powers and duties of its officers and employees, and financial information. This information has to be given to the people. And by the way, these information is suo moto. These has to already be given by the authorities. That is why you will see, go to every ministry's website, go to every PSU's website, go through PMO's website, state government websites, court websites. They will always tell you, this is our organization, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is the organizational structure, these are the officials, these are our employees, this is what they do, this is where so and so is posted, and the larger financial dealings of the organization, so that the people necessarily have access to these opportunities. मतलब ये पहले से ही उनको मिल गया, हमको अलग से केस फाइल करने की जरूरत नहीं है, एप्लीकेशन फाइल करने की जरूरत नहीं है. This is to ensure, this is basically a very simple way of saying this is an FAQ. FAQs are frequently asked questions. So these suo moto disclosures are basically FAQs. These are frequently asked questions on a website. The same thing is now RTI. Okay. If there is any information which is not covered here, then the citizens have the right to request for it from the authorities. And this would mean documents, files, electronic records under the control of public authority. Okay. As much as possible, you should get your information here. If you don't get your information here, then in that case, you can file for an application. It is called an RTI application. Now let us understand, where is the RTI application filed? What is the structure? Okay. These public authorities include self-government, bodies of self-government, constitutional, any other, kuch bhi, matlab basic funda is anything under Article 12 will be covered under RTI. Any body will technically be covered under RTI. Okay, basic funda hai. Public authorities are those which are largely covered under Article 12. So they would include ministries, public sector undertakings, regulatories, anybody. They would therefore also include entities owned, controlled, or substantially financed, or non-governmental organizations substantially financed or indirectly by funds provided by the government. So yes, you can. So for example, that is the case. BCCI is not state, Abhijit. Excellent question, actually. BCCI is not state. The RTI commissioners have wanted it to come under state, but it is not. Okay, so this is applied to those. And of course, we know that there is nothing called absolute law. So there are certain exceptions to these. The exceptions are not asked in the prelims because these are legally ambiguous. So anything that affects national security or the integrity of the nation, so those things. So basically what it basically means is any information that the public should have anyways known should be given to the public. Okay, that's the basic idea. Obviously, you will not call up Bhabha Atomic Research Center and say, can you tell me where the nuclear reactors are? I want to go for a family vacation. That would be a problem. That would not be allowed under an RTI application. Clear on this? That's the basic idea. Now, please understand the basic structure, and you need to know, right? Yes, obviously, you can't call up the PMO and say, can you give me nuclear codes to the same? Okay. Political parties at the moment are not under RTI. They're not defined under 12. Okay. Now, let us see how this works. The right to information setup works under a three layers of principle, three layers of organization. ठीक है, तीन tier में होता है, तीन hierarchy में होता है. The Official Secrets Act is, yes. Let's see how this works. सबसे पहले, let's take a simple example. A very very simple example. Let us say you want to find out, you live in a village, you will live in a district, you live in a city, whatever, and you want to find out what is happening to the roads development project. Okay, roads development project. अब देखो यहाँ पे क्या हुआ. Where did you first go to? You first went and filed an RTI at the municipality or the municipal corporation in your district. Okay, municipal corporation in your district. This municipal corporation will have a public information officer. This person will receive your RTI and within 30 days will reply saying, okay, we are giving you the information, or will reply saying, we are not giving you the information, or will give you partial information. If they deny giving you the information, or if they give you partial information and you're not happy with it, then you can appeal to the appellate authority. This appellate authority is also at the organizational level, is also at the institutional level. Then also, if you are unhappy, then you have two choices. If this was a state government institution, then you will go to the State Information Commission, which will have one Chief Information Commissioner and 10 Information Commissioners. Otherwise, if it is a central body that you have a problem with, a central body that you have an issue with, then what you can do is you will go to the Central Information Commissioner. There also you will have one Information Commissioner and 10 Information Commissioners. Okay? So the Chief Information Commissioner, there is one at the state level, one at the center. There are 10 Information Commissioners at the state level and 10 Information Commissioners at the central level. And these are the ones who essentially look into, now these are the institutions that look into your final points of authority. Ki, haan, the PIO at municipal corporation also said no. Then the appellate authority at municipal corporation also said no. Now you went to the State Information Commissioner. Why? Because the municipal corporation is a state body. Okay. Now let us say you want a national body. Let us say with the national body, let us say you go to the Steel Authority of India Limited. The problem is that you want to ask how is the steel allotment process, the steel sourcing process happening. You will first apply to the PIO of the Steel Authority of India Limited. If you do not like it, you will go to the appellate authority of the Steel Authority of India Limited. From here, you will go to the Central Information Commission, which will have either one chief election commissioner and 10 one chief information commissioner and 10 information commissioners. So that's the idea. Ya to you can go to the state or you can go to the center. You cannot go to both. This is not an appellate. ये नहीं कि state में भी दिक्कत होगी तो center में जा रहे, वो नहीं कर सकते. Clear on this? Why? Because organizations under the state should be dealt by the state. Organizations under the center should be dealt by the center. Now, why does this become important? Because we recently passed the RTI Amendment Act, and under the RTI Amendment Act, in subka salary plus your tenure is now going to be decided by the central government. This is why there is a problem. Okay, the salary and the tenure of everything, of central information commissioners as well as the state information commissioners, they will be determined by the central government. Now, why can the center do this? Because information is in the concurrent list. The center can make a law overpowering the states. The other reason why RTI was also in the news is because the Chief Justice of India is also now under RTI. And there was also a Supreme Court judgment that if there is a conflict between RTI and right to privacy, ki information or privacy, you have the right to know where did the minister go on foreign travel. You don't have the right to know what did the minister pack in his suitcase. This is privacy. This is organization. This is allowed. This is not. That's what the Supreme Court judgment was. If there's a conflict between right to information and right to privacy, you will always value right to privacy as opposed to right to information. Okay? These are two very important bodies, and I'm quite sure if there has to be a question, it will be coming from here only. Okay, now that is it. Okay, now I just need to discuss a few things more. थोड़ा सा खाली जगह चाहिए मुझे. Yes. So there are two bodies that I want you to also do. They're very minor bodies, but they're also important. One is NHRC, National Human Rights Commission, because there was an amendment to the same. The name of the judgment is not needed for the prelims. That is why, Siddharth, I am not informing you of the same. The information has to be very, very deep, very, very limited. Okay. The National Investigation Authority is essentially a body which looks into terrorism or national security cases. Okay. So NHRC is a body that you must definitely go through. Why? Because you had an NHRC amendment. Now, any judge of the Supreme Court or the High Court can become a chairperson of either the National Human Rights Commission or the State Human Rights Commission. Okay, and the number of people in the Human Rights Commission has increased. The tenure has increased. The number of women in NHRC has increased. Now members of National Commission of Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribe would also be part of the members of NHRC. So the what has happened is now NHRC will definitely have women representatives, SC representatives, ST representatives, because we'll have National Commission of Scheduled Caste and National Commission of Scheduled Tribe, uh, which will also look into. They'll also send people to be members of the NHRC. So at least we'll now be looking at SC ST welfare also, because let's be very honest, a lot of times the human rights get violated because of caste and gender reasons in this country. Okay, and that's the larger idea. Okay. uh, so NHRC, please go through it. Just know that the composition is important in terms of who's going to come, because the judgment was on the amendment that happened to NHRC. And second is, please go through the basic provisions of GST Council. This is not an extra constitutional body. GST Council is a constitutional body. Please go through it. I will upload the readings on both of them on the Telegram channel as well, so that we can answer them at the same minute. No, you will have to, your reading list. Yes, absolutely. 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 If all of you know, I have already given you a reading list from Lakshmikant based on the sixth edition. It is on the Telegram channel. It's also on the Google Drive. If you just go through that, it's more than enough. You would not be needed. Uh, you would not be needed. Yes, it can be retired person also, can also be a non can also be any other judge of any other court as well. Okay, and that's all that is needed, right? Just give me a second. Let me just go through a few things. If you're non-satisfied with chief, and yes, we can go to a higher court. In Lokpal, special court does not adjudicate. Yet there is a court. We haven't set up the special court yet. Is the government justification valid for RT amendment? It's a political question. Sorry. If Madras High Court decides the recommendations of HRC are binding, well, it does then. Well, it will be applicable to the territory of Madras. Okay. The CGI comes under RTI. Yes. Yes, Anamika, I've just discussed NHRC. Privacy prevails over information. Yes. Internet lockdown in JNK. Well, we had the Public Safety Act. The government thinks there were reasonable restrictions, so be it. That's a political answer. Appellate body would be any competition appellate tribunal, income tax appellate tribunal, stuff like that. Okay. So that is it. That's all that is needed. I will see you guys, I think, on Monday with important laws that are needed for the pre. Now, this has to be done very carefully, because you tend to indulge in laws or legislations or bills. On Monday at 4 o'clock, we'll do a session on important laws. I will see you guys on Monday at 4 o'clock. Thank you so much. And please take care. Please be safe. Don't give in to rumors. Just maintain good hygiene, and please take care. We're always here if there's anything that you need. Take care. Bye bye. See you.